This is the fourth and final installment in a series of episodes talking specifically about leadership. First, I explored the idea that most of what people hold up as examples of leadership aren't leadership at all. Next, I looked at some research from leadership studies pioneer Warren Bennis, in which he talks about the one thing that seems to matter most in the making of a leader. Concerning the making of a leader, I then looked at the monumental research project from Dr. J. Robert Clinton that looks at the 5 stages of leadership development God Himself uses to grow us as leaders. Today, I want to make one simple argument about leadership taken from the world of psychology, specifically personality styles. And that argument is this: all leaders need to be able to stretch beyond their primary leadership styles. Interestingly enough, when we start talking about personality styles and tools used to measure them, there are a lot of people who immediately get bent out of shape. They see the whole thing as mumbo-jumbo, pseudoscience on the level of astrology and horoscopes. Personally, I've found that better than 90% of those who feel this way, they do so because they don't understand how it works. So, let me demystify things a bit and give you the simplest, clearest definition that I can using the DISC, which is the tool in which I am a certified trainer. First, what it is not. The DISC is not a mind-reading tool. It's not spiritual or supernatural in any way. So what is it? Well, the DISC is strictly a pattern recognition tool. The DISC assessment simply analyzes your responses and input in order to identify behavioral patterns that you have developed over a lifetime. In other words, the DISC personality tool is really nothing more than a tool to help identify your interpersonal habits, and its accuracy is statistically astounding. So, what does this have to do with leadership? The CEO and Director of Research for DISC, Drs. Jeffrey Sugerman and Mark Scullard, respectively, along with writer Emma Wilhelm, used their extensive knowledge of the DISC tool to conduct a detailed analysis of leadership. And they set out to answer 3 specific questions. First, what does the DISC personality model have to say about leadership? Second, what are the contemporary and traditional best practices in leadership, and what do those experts have to say? And then third, is there any correlation between 1 and 2? As they started collecting data, what they found was a very robust relationship between some of these leadership principles, both traditional and contemporary, and what DISC has to say about an individual. So, the 8 dimensions of leadership is based on DISC pattern recognition, meaning it analyzes your leadership habits, revealing your strengths, those well-established and desirable leadership habits, as well as weaknesses, desirable leadership habits that you have not yet developed. The fact of the matter is, we all approach leadership from a unique starting point, a combination of our own psychological makeup, intelligence, training, and experience. And we already know that to be an effective leader, you need to know your strengths, right? But that's only part of the story. You also need a broad perspective on all the behaviors needed to be an effective leader and on God's lifetime work in progress. Let me give you a good example of this broad perspective need taken from the book, The 8 Dimensions of Leadership. When I started at a large corporation back in 1981, one leader said, I was rewarded for being the smartest assistant product manager. Not only was I smart, but I did what management wanted to see. I beat my peers by always being the first one to answer. I was smarter than my peers when it came to identifying important product trends, and I regularly pointed out things that other people didn't see. And I got rewarded for that type of get-it-done behavior. It seems pretty straightforward, right? If you perform your job well and show some hustle, eventually you'll move up the ranks. So you do this for a number of years, and then all of a sudden someone comes along and says, hey, great, we're going to reward you. You're now the head of operations, and you've got 50 people working for you. And this is where things got a little more complicated, he said. He said, I kept on doing exactly what I've been doing, exactly what I've been rewarded for, and guess what? I stopped getting rewarded. Now, all of a sudden, people hated me. They're like, no, I do that job. You need to motivate and inspire me to do it. and nobody taught me how to do that, end quote. The bottom line is, as you strive to grow as a leader, you'll need to focus your leadership energy in new directions, and this is probably going to be a stretch for you. The more responsibility you gain, the more you will probably be challenged to increase your competencies. The truth is, a one-dimensional leader, no matter how good he or she is at that one thing, can't provide the kind of leadership that leads to innovation or social change or organizational transformation. Without the diverse skills needed to deal with complex challenges, a one-dimensional leader often will choose an inadequate response. The 8 dimensions are important because every effective leader will need to be able to use each dimension at various points in his or her career. Now, I'm the first to admit that kind of flexibility and well-roundedness is much easier for some than it is for others. I could do 10 podcast episodes just on the areas that challenge and befuddle me from time to time. We all have a psychological comfort zone towards which we gravitate, and habitual or default setting, if you will. So some dimensions of leadership will always be both more difficult and more taxing or draining than others, depending on our own inclinations. But, and here's the key, change is inevitable. What works for you as a leader today may not work next year. Or, as author and executive leadership coach Marshall Goldsmith says, what got you here won't get you there. Becoming a more effective leader is about expanding your leadership framework and developing greater flexibility. The goal is that you not only learn to stretch and to grow, but also to feel more comfortable in your own skin as a leader. Your default leadership habits are valuable. You just need to build on them, and that starts by understanding both their benefits and limitations. The end goal of the 8 dimensions of leadership is for you to lead like you, only better. Okay, let's address one question that comes up a lot around this model. There are 8 dimensions, and many of them will be a stretch for me. Do I have to have mastery over all 8 dimensions to be an effective leader? The simple answer is no. You don't have to be an expert. There are going to be certain areas that are just unnatural for you now, and they may never really feel natural. But you can and should strive to achieve some basic level of competency in every area of the missing habits, or else they're going to start to hamper your effectiveness. If you'd like to explore this idea further and learn more about those 8 dimensions, I highly recommend the book, The 8 Dimensions of Leadership. Or, if you prefer, reach out to me via social or my website, ericwilbanks.com, and I will happily point you in the right direction and help you in any way that I can. As Sugerman and Scullard say, quote, while it is currently fashionable to promote a strengths-based approach to leadership in which a leader only focuses on competencies that align with natural talents, research shows that leaders who try to outsource those dimensions that they find less natural ultimately fail, end quote. In other words, that's the wrong way to think. Instead, determine that you will start to pay attention to the missing habits in your leadership toolbox, those missing dimensions in your leadership style, and commit to pushing through the discomfort and getting at least a minimal level of competency in those areas as well. Remember, a better mind always leads to a better life.